West Point roots behind. Got like my hair. I'm
I
fully
feel
hippie
you
though,
all day
man.
long, man. I feel you all day long. Like I can't like the like the long hair for me, the longest my hair has ever been, 46 years, and the beard, and I'm just like these are all expressions of choice, and I'm like never going back.
100%, dude. I'm
Yeah.
so excited to connect with you, man. You're living
Yeah.
in Italy, right?
Yeah. We live in Como, not far from like wicked close to the lake, but just north of Milan. Yeah.
Nice. What prompted you to move out there?
My last assignment, 2018, we moved from Germany, and there's a NATO headquarters near Milan. Who knew? Um, and it was a 3-year gig, and I was already knew I was kind of emotionally walking away from the army, and then extended for 2 years, and then my wife and our 15-year-old twins are like, everyone's happy, everyone's healthy, everyone's thriving. I'm like, and we haven't lived in the States since 2011, so I did 4 overseas tours in my last sets of tours, which is freaking amazing. And we're all like, why would we go back? And so we're going to stay here until Tony and Sophie, start university, and then who knows where the hell we go. So
Nice, man. I feel the
yeah,
same. I've lived here in Colombia, South America, for over 9 years now.
yeah,
So I've also been out of the States for a while.
yeah.
Um, Dude, yeah. One thing that we can do if you want, we can actually turn this into a bit of a podcast. That's the same conversation we'd have anyway, but it would be nice, I think, I just launched wakingwarrior.org. So I've got
Mhm.
a free online community for vets now, along with a series of courses. So the first we've come out with is healing PTSD. I would love to get
Mhm.
your feedback on that. But as part of that, what I'd like to do is I've realized that a lot of veterans that are struggling with stuff don't realize they kind of feel alone. But the reality is that like we're not alone. And there's so many of us that have faced this and found it and found healing through a variety of different ways.
Yeah.
So I guess I'd love to hear about you, maybe why you got into the army and what your
Mhm.
experiences were like there, and we'll just kick it off from there, Matt.
Let's pick up some scissors and run down the hallway, my friend.
Let's do it.
So so American by birth, pops 30 years in the army. So the army has, and until I retired in last October, was the foundation of my life. It was the constant. So grew up in Germany, born in Texas, raised in Virginia primarily towards the end, a bit of Colorado as well. And so I was 18, man. My family didn't have the resources to go to school. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to enlist like my father did. That's how it works, right? And then the army offered me a scholarship, and I was like, okay, if I'm going to go, play army, I was like, well, I need to go to like a wicked hard school, so like I test myself. So I went to VMI in Virginia, a military school, and it was fabulous. And by that I mean not comfortable, right?
I feel you, man. You know
Yeah,
about
and
West Point,
you
right?
know the deal, man. Same
Yeah,
thing.
I,
It's
I
just
feel you
different
hard.
flavor, same thing, different type of prison, really. So like so et cetera, et cetera. Right. So 4 years, right? Do that. I know I'm going to the army. Go somewhere hard so that I get the experience. I feel like I need to test myself. And at 18, I need that stability and certainty in my life based on where I came from and where I thought I was going. So 4-year commitment, 4 and change, and I'm like, I'm done. I'm not playing army. 4 years and I'm out. Yeah, last October I retired after 23 years. So stayed did her 20-year thing. For me, the army was an opportunity to take some steps up in life through education, experience. Generally is pretty positive. We lived in South Korea twice for 3 years and 3 years before and after kids. We did an exchange posting in Australia, right? Okay, that was awesome. Germany, and then finished up, as I mentioned, here in Italy, and that's where we're here now for a while. And so, and then as you would expect in that time frame from 2000 to 2023, there's the deployment. So 2 years to Iraq, one for the initial party in 2003 for a year with 4ID, and then back again in 08, 09 on a MIT team. So team of advisors embedded with Iraqis with all the complexity and traumas, if we want to step right into that come with that,
Yeah.
right? So so kind of a typical Army career. Realized at about 18 years this wasn't going to be my whole life, and started to wander through a couple of different things. When got a doctorate, when did PMP, Lean Six Sigma, None of that excited me, man. I was like, these are all shiny badges. And I was like, I don't like any of these. I mean, I'll keep them on my resume, but I don't like any of these. And so then I discovered coaching. And this is where I'm going to loop to your question, man. Um, I was
We have
coached
the
for the
time.
first
There's no
time.
rush.
Yeah. I was coached by the first time with the Commit Foundation, which is one of those many meaningful and useful nonprofits that help vets when they're trying to move out of that space. And I tell you that the couple of sessions I had with Jason, my coach, changed my world, man. I started to realize that I was not a machine. There is more to me than just the uniform, the drab colors, etc. And this is what 2000 2021, and this finally leads me to therapy. So I had suppressed, I had taken all the traumas from my 2 years in Iraq and other things that had happened in the army, whether it's an Apache crash and South Korea, now 10 years ago that I was a first responder for, things like that I just neatly put in a box and tucked inside of me. And so coaching was a recognition that there was something wrong. Like I needed to
Mm.
do more. And so I went to 2 years of therapy, including EMDR, which was tremendous, not easy. Like it was hard. But on the other end, I realized that again, I had to take care of myself, and that was like I needed to take care of myself. I couldn't carry that false bravado, that stoicism for the rest of my life. It was going to kill me. Like literally, it was going to just like kill my fire, and then at some point kill me. And all of those things led me to a much better version of myself. And I started this journey about 2021, and I retired in 2023. So I had like 2 or 3 solid years of trying to figure out who the hell I was again, work through the challenges when you leave of identity, meaning, purpose, and coaching. For me, being coached and then becoming a credentialed coach through Georgetown, and now it's what I do all day long. That was critical for me because I
Mm.
the first step is helping yourself so that you can help others. So that's the short version.
Dude, there's so much
About
gold in there, man.
I know, right?
There's
So
like a
let's
lot of gold in there.
yeah. Where do you want to go with it, man?
The first thing I wanted to ask about is like, how did you come to that realization that you needed help? Because like, and maybe more accurately or more pointedly, what were the sort of things that were happening in your life as a result of you boxing up that trauma and not letting that
Uh,
go?
so it's really it's really interesting, and so it manifested in different ways, but I didn't really see it. Whether it was not alcohol abuse, I've never been an alcoholic, but I certainly prescribe to the narrative that, or the acceptance that alcohol is something you just do. You just drink a lot of alcohol and to take care of yourself and to numb things. Really, when
Hmm.
Afghanistan, like the Western effort in Afghanistan, fell apart in August of 2022 or 2021, 2020.
I think it was 22.
I don't remember. Yeah,
I forget.
yeah. So Afghanistan fell apart like in a month. 20 years of effort just evaporated, right? From for Afghanis, for Americans, for Germans, for this community of people who had spent tens of thousands, like they had died, sacrificed being away from their families, and it just evaporated. And I had never been. I never had the pleasure of an all expense paid vacation to Afghanistan, a deployment. But there was an itch to see something like that and to know people who had invested in that, like with everything and everything. It was an itch inside of me. Like I could feel it.
Mm.
And this is August, right, when it really falls apart. And by December, I'm like, I don't feel stable. Like there's something wrong, and that's what led me to therapy. So the combination of getting a little more self awareness through being coached, starting to recognize that it's okay to feel this stuff. And then I went to the local. We're here in Italy, so there's an American base about 2 hours away. I went to them. I'm like, I need help. There's something like I don't know what it is. I described it as an issue.
Not sure if it's on your end or my end, but I think we've got a little bit of a glitch. I'll give it a couple of minutes and hopefully it'll resolve. Okay, I think we're back. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we had a glitch either on your end or my end. Doesn't really matter. But you were saying
No,
you'd
I'm
gone
sure it's mine.
to you'd gone to the base. You said you needed help, and this was kind of
Yep.
triggered by the retreat, for lack of a better word,
Yep.
from Afghanistan.
Yep. And then that led me to finding a therapist who had no affiliation with the Army, who did work with the MDR. And then, a solid year of work about trauma from Iraq times two. A couple other things that had happened, like I mentioned, the helicopter crash in Korea, things like that. And um, I got, I didn't know what I was walking into, and I sure as hell didn't know what I would look like on the back end. But let me tell you, and I'm very open about this with everyone. Like my transition from the Army, I am like excessively vulnerable about it because I know I'm not the only one. I had plenty of
True.
bad days on deployments, but man, I know there are people who had it a lot freaking worse than me. So
Yeah,
I am,
that's a thing that I'm fighting against as well. Is this idea of like comparing our trauma to somebody else's.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like you
It's just
just
like
can't
no,
do that. You shouldn't do that.
yeah, yeah. It's like this sucked. Like mine sucked less or mine sucked more. It's just like it, they stay with you. These terrible
Yeah.
days, they stay with you. And if you don't find ways to take the edge off through therapy, things like that, they come out in ways that you can't see and feel, whether it's through alcohol, the way you treat your family, the way you treat yourself. Man,
Yeah.
it's still there. And this
What were some of
it
those things for
is
you then? Like,
um
I mean, it sounded like maybe over drinking and alcohol without being
yeah,
like an alcoholic, maybe
yeah,
as a
yeah.
numbing.
Yeah, it was
Like
numbing.
what
It was easier to numb to drink than numb. Oh, what else, man? Just not not taking care of myself physically. I mean, I have this giant water bottle now, right? This thing is like 3.78 liters, and it's less about I usually don't drink it every day. I never drink water, right?
mm,
Unless I was like downrange or something like that. So this is a symbol. This huge, American-sized water bottle. It's a symbol that I matter, and I have to
mm,
take care of my body beyond the absolute minimum that I had for all the times in the Army. So, using alcohol as a crutch, not taking care of myself, and just being out of touch with my feelings, which, being vulnerable to say enough to say, yeah, I don't feel great. And now, like, if I have a bad morning, whether it's from sleep apnea or something else, or just tired, I just accept that that's okay. Whereas
yeah.
before, it's like, suck it up, buttercup. Let's go. Move out and draw fire. All the platitudes that we've internalized that we just have to keep pushing. And at a certain point, through a lot of work, I realized that works in very specific circumstances, but it's not sustainable.
Mhm.
It's not
Yeah,
nourishing.
it's good. It's good for soldiers. It's definitely not good when you're not a soldier anymore.
Yep.
You know, a lot of the work that I'm trying to do is encourage this idea that vulnerability is actually strength, and that in the Western context, men are not really given a lot of spaces to express how they feel and be vulnerable with others, and even less so in the military. And you put those two
Yep.
together, and you got a pretty nasty cocktail of people that are just kind of carrying up all this stuff until it, worst case scenario, blows up into something they can't control anymore. I
Yep.
actually just talked to had a talk and podcast with Eric Kreitz, and he was a lieutenant colonel in the
I know
SF.
Eric.
And you know Eric?
I do know
Oh,
Eric.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite a great dude, man.
Yeah. He's
So you know
fabulous.
his story. Like
Yeah.
he relied on alcohol as a defense and coping mechanism until he tried to take his own life in a blackout drunk state. So I'm hoping that I wonder what advice you might have to veterans and specifically veteran men that are seeing this, because a lot of them don't ask for help until it's either too late or they're like so far down the river that it's going to be really hard to come back. What
Yeah.
would you tell them? Because like we're battling a lot of this. I get a lot of, oh, you're going to think this is gay, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
what? No.
Yeah.
So what would you tell those? What would you tell our veteran brothers?
So and I want to echo what you shared, man. the spaces we've come from, whether it's society, the military, all those layers, vulnerability is not celebrated. There's an expectation that men have to always be the provider, strong. And anytime you step away from that, like the first question that comes up for me, like when I'm excessively vulnerable about how I'm doing, point in my transition, even though I left the Army 6 months ago, it's still ongoing, right?
Mm.
If I'm weak, if I'm perceived as weak, if I'm vulnerable, what's the story that, like, how am I like, what's the perception of how I change from the eyes of my children or the eyes of my wife? And what I will tell you is, I think to your question, is that every time I've been vulnerable, the reaction uniformly has been I hear you, I support you, how can I help? I've never
Absolutely.
had anyone who pushed me away. And quite honestly, if I did, that would be a flag. I'm like, I probably don't need that person and their energy in my life. So my advice is to, when you feel it, even if you don't know what it is, like when I was talking about my Afghanistan, I didn't know what the hell it was. There was something wrong. Find someone that you trust. Find another veteran who will know roughly what you've gone through, and just talk to them. And then if that
That's
leads you
great advice, man.
to a professional who can help you even further, or a spouse, a confidant, someone that you can, because it's just not the message that we've internalized that vulnerability is weakness is just quite plainly bullshit.
100%.
Vulnerability is the glue. It's the real glue that connects people. It's the truth.
Yeah.
Everything else is an avatar. It's a veneer. It's just not real.
I agree with you, man. I spent last 5 years or so, I've been involved in the traditional plant medicine healing communities down here in Colombia. So I'm training under a few different teachers now. And yeah, that's
Hmm.
been my experience, last 3, 4 years in men's groups, leading and training and guiding men's groups. And then also, like holding veterans as they're puking their guts out over a fire at 3 in the morning on ayahuasca, man. So I've been
Yeah.
like trial by fire here, but every single freaking time, it's like we have to get past this issue of getting past our own head, because our own
Yep.
head is like, oh no, they're going to see you as weak, or
Yep.
even down to the level of, oh, I'm going to burden other people with this knowledge of my healing.
Yeah.
It's like, no, man. It's like
Yeah.
I'm really, really doing whatever I can to get a great advice, like what you just said. That's it. Like if you're not feeling well, talk to somebody,
Yeah.
like someone you trust or a veteran. It's
Yep.
one of the reasons why I'm my vision for this community for Waking Warrior is a community where people can do just that, like learn together, but also start establishing relationships. Because I wanted to talk about, you mentioned identity, purpose, and values when you left the
Hmm.
army, and you're kind of like really reasonably still young in your transition phase. A lot of the conversations I have is veterans often feel like they lost their entire identity when they leave the
Yeah.
military.
Yep.
Can you talk about what that experience was like for you, or what thoughts or advice you
Yeah.
have
I
on it?
mean, it's even more. I mean, there are certain professions where when you step into them, your individual identity is subordinated to the collective. And that's in the military, as you know, that manifests in every way, whether it's uniforms, haircuts, what you can and can't do, what success is, because it's always about the mission and the organization, and then and the safety, and then yourself, because safety is always in there somewhere, right? And then like you last. So you internalize that message. You hear it enough, you're like, yeah, that's right. That what? How could it not be right? And so to recognize that part of that is going away. The word that
Mm.
comes up from me, Scotty, and I've discussed this with a couple of people, is like grieving. It's taking the time to grieve the loss, to accept that there will be a change. You're not, the ambiguity, the uncertainty of that, but to grieve the loss in that identity. And there's not much, like we were talking about vulnerability. Outside of a funeral, how many like opportunities do you get to grieve a transition, especially if
Or
you've
just
done
cry
something?
openly, for a man to
Exactly.
just simply cry openly and not be judged for it.
Yep. And like it brings me back to like when my retirement ceremony was actually almost a year ago. So we did a little earlier. So May of last year did my retirement ceremony. very nice, lots of nice things, flags, pomp and circumstance, family. And like now I look back at it now, it's like a funeral without like the annoying death.
Mm.
It's a way to say, to bring people that you care about and to mark the end of something. And I didn't understand that in the moment because it was a ritual that I knew I wanted to do, and I wanted to use it to thank the people around me who would help me, my family, my wife, our kids, etc. But I didn't realize how important it was, that ritual, to say, this is ending. This is going to change. And for me, I needed to grieve. I needed something to mark the end of my identity, or the end of like this story, this part of my life that had been there, like I said, with my pops, the whole life. The Army was the foundation of everything. And I was leaving that. Okay. That's a little difficult.
Mm. So what then is the transition for creating a new identity? Like if you're grieving and leaving the old one behind, what's that process look like of figuring out who the hell you are now,
Yeah.
or who you want to be?
Yeah. And I was lucky, or maybe a combination of luck and being deliberate. I Like I said, I think it was in 2021 I was coach for the first time. And that's when I can say I started to leave the Army. So like a full 2 years before I was actually leaving on paper and getting my magical, DD 214. I had time. I went on a 6-month long skill bridge, one of the new internships they're doing for soldiers
Hmm.
who are leaving. So I had time to not wear a uniform, to work from here in our home, in our apartment, to grow a beard. I had time to make these very small choices. So I was, in a sense, there was some prep, but I was also lucky because I had time to step away, to slowly step away. And then in that, I found new communities, whether it's volunteering at our kids' international school, um, coaching communities with different coaching companies, this group, that, volunteering to support vets in transition with this coaching company. So I knew that I was leaving this very strong, like mildly oppressive community. I knew that I didn't want that. Like I wanted a patchwork, but I wanted choice. I wanted to be able to choose a patchwork of communities that I could still get like a little bit, like dip into that one. I know I still need a connection. I know I still needed community. And I had time to start to like wander, stumble, bump into that before the day came. And so when it came,
Mm.
it was less jolting, less uh, less difficult, I guess
Less
is
of a
the simplest
shock.
way to say
Yeah.
it. Yeah, exactly.
Is it the coaching that helped you realize you needed community and identity? Because I feel like most service members don't really realize that as much as they probably
Yeah.
should.
Um, let's see so yeah, the coach. So most of my, yeah, coaching was a big part of it. Being coached, learning how to coach, and then coaching others now. Like right now, I coach people active duty in the Army, and I coach veterans who are in transition. So I still have a connection, because a couple of years ago, if you'd asked me, do you want to be connected with the Army afterwards? I was like, nope, I'm done. Divorce it. Don't need it. Happy to accept my pension. But now I realize that it's part of my story. I
Yeah.
still want to be connected to it, but I want to choose how to. So I had the time. So yeah, to answer your question, coaching was important for me because it gave me choice to connect with different communities, some in Europe, some in the US. And I now, as I feel it now, if I didn't have those communities, I would have been in trouble. I would have struggled a lot more.
Mm. Yeah, I feel that. Yeah, I had a pretty rough transition myself. But interestingly, kind of a similar to you. I mean, I was medically retired, so I froze off a toe and a half in Alaska. 'Cause like an officer, I couldn't land out of the gate. So I was snowshoeing out at -40 in Alaska, got lost for 8 hours, almost lost my fingertips, nearly half my
Oof.
foot. Yeah, it was bad, man. It was really bad. So I was in rear detachment while my troops went to deploy, which is a huge thing for me, man. Just sitting on the tarmac, on a crutch, watching my men, my mortar platoon go away to combat without me. Dude, that was fucking rough.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I waited for about a year while we were kind of in surgery and then out of surgery and recovering. And there was a military family life consultant, which was basically a bunch of therapists that the Army had hired to try to figure out, okay, how do we prevent all this PTSD from happening? There's this little Jewish doctor, Bill Winters, that was in the office next to me, and I was making a joke or something one day. He's kind of pops his head. He's like, "Hey, sir, it sounds like a lot of pain in that joke. I think we should talk." All right. So I ended up talking to Dr. Winters for 6 months, about 3 hours a day. He would just
Yeah.
come into my office. I would get like 3 hours of therapy a day for half a
Yeah.
year. That
Wow.
changed my freaking life.
Yep.
And then I remember I went into the mental health resource unit at the Army at Fort Wainwright. I said, "Hey, um, Dr. Winters had just left." I said, "My military family life consultant has left. I'm about to get out in a couple months. I'd really love to talk to some more people because I'm really enjoying where this is going." And they said, "Well, are you planning on killing yourself or anyone else?" I said, "No." I was like, "Well, we can't help you." He's like,
Yeah.
"That's not the point of therapy, right? It's not just to prevent
Uh,
people from killing each other, right? That's what." So I was crestfallen, man. But yeah, like that early coaching, that early therapy for me changed the entire direction and trajectory of my life. And I'm very grateful for it.
yeah. And I appreciate you sharing that, Scotty. And and I'm sitting with that moment where you shared where, hey, like you're essentially saying, this was really helpful. I need
Mm,
more. And they say you're not a statistic yet. So therefore we
exactly.
can't. And
Yes.
it's just like that. Come on. We got to do better than that, especially with the last 20 years. We got to do better than that.
This is why I'm starting Waking Warrior because I think it's time that I don't think we can afford to wait for
Yeah.
anyone else to solve this problem anymore. I think that veterans need to come together as a community. And specifically what I'm focusing on is veteran men, because there's a particular type of work that you can do in men's groups and in men's retreats and in a men's community you
Yeah.
can't necessarily do. Like it's harder for men to take off their armor when there's women around. Not saying
Yeah.
that's a bad thing. Definitely a lot of healing that can happen, but it's a very particular type of work that I want to do. And a
Yeah.
lot of it centers around what you brought up multiple times and what Eric is really on a lot about, which is vulnerability, you
Hmm.
know? So that's my passion. And I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to do this because I can't just sit and do nothing about it while 20 of us are killing ourselves every day. Like
Yeah.
I just can't, I can't anymore.
Yeah.
So I think it's time. I'm glad to hear that you're coaching veterans and transitioning service members too, man. So thank you for the work you're doing there as well. I'm curious, like because I'm actually building a transition course for service members
Hmm.
at the moment. What do you think that a good transition course should have in it? Because I think a lot of it focuses on the career aspect, like
Yeah.
here's how to understand the civilian world and here's how hard it is to find a job and here's what position you might want. I think that's really just maybe a tiny fraction of what a transition course should actually cover.
Yeah, I agree. And I had the same experience with the TAP. I mean, there's lots of great people doing great work, but it is very practical, surface level stuff.
Yeah, the
And then
TAP is in transition assistance program in the Army.
exactly, yeah, the Army's version of this is the compulsory thing that you have to do before you get out, and it's very practical in the sense of here's what LinkedIn is, here's how you file your VA claim, here's what a resume looks like, et cetera, et cetera. All the surface level stuff. It doesn't, when I went through it, and from my perspective, it doesn't tap into the emotional stuff: identity, community, purpose, meaning, values, all of those things outside of the Army. And that's one of the coaching companies I work with is called Caveo, Kaveo. CEO is a good friend of mine, Ali Rodriguez, Air Force veteran, lives in Spain, not too far away from me here in Italy. And so his coaching startup that I work with is everyone's vet or vet adjacent. And
Mm.
about a year ago, we decided that we wanted to do a transition course, and we've been doing it every month since then. And it's 2 hours long. It's free. And it's all of those things that we're talking about, Scotty. It's just we want to do it for people like within in that year space before, because you can't do a tremendous amount of stuff in the 2 hour workshop. But what you can do is plant a seed for these ideas that we were talking about: identity, meaning, value, purpose. What the hell does it look like outside of the Army? So yeah, that's a space that um, I will always run towards because I think it's important.
Mm.
It's important because the things that the compulsory stuff that you have to do when you leave doesn't tackle the emotional stuff.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. How do you think we can convince veterans that that's something worth focusing on?
I think it's conversations like this, man. It's enough people having vulnerable conversations about how much it sucks and how
Mm.
much it's not about continuing the stoicism we've internalized for decades and just carrying that shit on with you for the rest of your life. It
Yeah.
just doesn't work. It's being vulnerable. It's people saying, this was my story. This is what is difficult. And again, I've never had anyone come back to me and say, how can you do that? How can you be lesser because of that? All of the feedback that I've received has been, thank you. I appreciate
Mhm.
that. And even those who aren't ready to step into that space, they see it and they feel it. And you hope in that, in opening, like literally and figuratively opening yourself up, that you're planting a seed for someone to be able to, they might be able to do that themselves in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, man. I think that there's, and I'm also really curious to hear about the EMDR therapy and how that
Mm-hmm.
helped you with your PTSD, because I've heard of a lot of the traditional therapy helping, EMDR helping. What I want to do is like dig into a lot of these healing methodologies and modalities to showcase that it doesn't really matter. I'm completely agnostic. I don't care how you heal yourself. I got a
Yeah.
couple ways I think might help, but I want to get vets to a knowledge and understanding that there are hundreds of different ways to heal themselves. Because I'd love to hear more about EMDR and that helped you specifically, maybe some around the trauma and all
Yeah.
that process. What that was like.
So it was, I mean, it was quite similar to kind of traditional sit and talk therapy. I don't, I don't know the right word, so I'm going to go ahead and describe it in like the simplest
Yeah.
way. I mean, you show up for a
That's
therapist, you
probably
talk,
good. We're probably going to have eventually a Marine watching this, so let's speak to
and
them.
we'll hand out crayons as we should. So, and that's okay.
Indeed.
Um, um, so you like therapists, right? Most of the time, people like show up in an office, talk for an hour, right? That's therapy, right? And so that's how I started. And then, or I looked for a therapist who could do that and who could do EMDR because someone had told me, if you've experienced PTSD, this is a way. And I was like, oh shit, let's do that, right? And so, what was slightly different is EMDR is about using rapid eye movement or like tapping motions, like on your knees, to help you process a memory and to take the edge off of it. To be very simple. And so, when I'm talking about a day with this ID or whatever, and I'm going through the story, and I don't know the science behind it. I'm read about it, but I felt it. I was like, this works. When the therapist is sitting with you using a rapid eye movement or kind of repetitive tapping motions, and again, I don't know why, it helps. It helps
Hmm.
your body recognize that you're not there anymore. And so that the next time that smell, that sound, that thing that like grabs you by the back of your vest and takes you back into that moment, it's still going to be there, but it's going to be less powerful. And so I used EMDR in a kind of traditional, just a normal therapy looking room. I used that to work through all of those really bad days, and it helped.
Hmm.
I am less, I don't want to use the word triggered, but I struggle less in those moments when I think about them or when something pulls me back to them, again, whether it's sight or sound or smell. And it's not complicated. It's showing up for therapy and saying, hey, can we try this? And finding a person that you feel comfortable with. So it's not, again, people can look it up and figure out exactly how it works, but it was critical for me. I worked through every bad day and
Hmm.
it helped me.
Dude, that's amazing, man. I appreciate you sharing that story. Anything else that we might want to talk about in terms of experiences, thoughts, or ideas? I'm open to take it wherever you want it to flow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really drawn back to what we were talking about, Scotty, about the idea of just like talking to people.
Hmm.
Please don't suffer in silence, man. There are
Yeah.
so many people who have had similar experiences, and you'll never know until you open up just a little bit. And you don't have to like open yourself up 100%, and talk about terrible things. You can just say, "Hey, can we talk about this because this sucks?" Or when I think about this, this is how I feel. And just that first step for you and for that person you're sitting across from or that group of people you're sitting with, it can be tremendous. It can be that first step towards healing. And noting it's not a linear journey. It's not a straight line journey. It takes time. And much like we're talking about earlier, everyone's trauma is a little different. Everyone's path away from trauma, because you know it's always going to be there to some extent. But you can shift how it manifests. You can shift how it shows up and how it affects you. If you can have those. If you can start to have those conversations. So
And
it's talk.
maybe one day become grateful for it, for the things
Yeah.
that it
Oh,
taught you.
and then that's exactly the point. I never would have thought that I would have been happy about. We're not happy, but I know now that because of my experiences in the Army, because of the trauma that I experienced, because of the PTSD that I have now, which 2 years ago I never would have said. I never would have like I never would have been able to accept that label, and so now I accept it gladly. And that's the thing. That trauma has led me to a path where I have to help others, and it's part of who
Dude,
I am
I feel
now.
the same, man. I feel the
Yeah,
same. I can't not do anything about it. I have
yeah,
to. It's an
yeah,
imperative.
yeah. Yeah. It's like a fire, and that fire has shifted from one that's consuming me to one that's hopefully, ideally, a light for others.
Mhm. I love that, man. Yeah, I'd love to have you help with the Waking Warrior community if you're open to
Hmm.
joining, man, and
Yeah,
giving
yeah,
me some feedback on what we can do better. Like we just had our let's see, I launched it yesterday. We got 5 people in there already, so I'm really excited to look back in a couple of years on this podcast. I'm like, yeah, we got 5 people. We're like at 50,000. I just imagine these sort of conversations happening much more often.
yeah,
Let's have 1,000 of these conversations. Let's have 100 courses up about PTSD and alcohol abuse and transition
yep.
and communication and vulnerability and all the good stuff. Um, how can people reach you if they want to get in touch with you or want to receive the help that you are doing with your coaching?
I'm happy to. I'll share my LinkedIn profile. I'm not on any other social media. I'm not sure that I can be bothered to join the other ones, but
I feel you, man.
happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. Yeah, and I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor, but I am more than happy, inside or outside of coaching, to have a conversation with any veteran or anyone who's veteran adjacent who just needs to talk.
Yeah, because
Um,
the support network needs help as well. That's the thing.
yeah,
Something we often forget, right? The wives, the families, the kids,
yeah,
the extended families and communities also need help.
yeah. No, I hear you all day long, and yeah, I agree. And so, I'll share my LinkedIn with you. But what I would offer is, if someone just needs, if the sound of my voice and the story that I'm sharing connects with you, and you want to talk, all you got to do is send me a note, and we will find the time, and we will talk about whatever the hell you want to talk about, and that's okay.
Awesome, man. I'll include your LinkedIn profile with the show notes, and hopefully we'll see you on Waking Warrior pretty soon, man.
Hell
And if there's
yeah,
anything that I can do to help, please let me know, brother. I really appreciate this conversation, your openness, your vulnerability, and your example to other soldiers of what it's like to transition well, and also to have the humility and vulnerability and strength enough to say, here's something that's not okay with me. I need to work on it, and then
yeah.
doing it. So well done, brother.
No, thank you, and thank you for taking this on, because we all need it.
My absolute pleasure, man. And as you know, I can't do anything else.
There you go. Anything from me, man?
All good, brother. I'll follow up later by I'll follow up in a couple minutes with the how to join the community,
Yeah,
and
please do.
looking forward to having you as a part of it, brother.
Awesome. All right, man.
All right, man.
Have a lovely day.
Be well, dude. Enjoy Italy. I'm jealous.
I
Come
will.
visit me in Colombia sometime.
Come visit me in Italy sometime.
I might actually do that. I'm actually thinking about we're trying to set up a trip right now to come bring the ancestral medicines to Italy. They're training with a healer here. We'll probably be bringing ayahuasca, kambo, and bufo, and then I'm carrying a personal altar, which is a way of saying I'm serving with
Yeah.
chuma, which is another wonderful plant medicine. So you might actually see me in Italy. Maybe we'll take
Hey,
medicine
hey,
together. That would be
there you go.
amazing.
Where you go? You know where you're going in Italy, or where you might
I
go?
I forget. I honestly forget. It's a buddy of
Yeah, yeah,
mine that has a retreat center down there that he's opening up and asking. I need to find out where it's at.
yeah. Okay.
But
Shoot me a note. I'm in
I'll message you that.
like far north, but planes, trains, automobiles, etc. So let me know.
Oh yeah, man. Will do, brother. Be well. Go Army. Beat Navy.
Thanks. Always.
No,
Have a good day, man.
you too.